Welcome to A Changed Life. This is a podcast about choosing differently, how you think, how you relate, and how you lead yourself. Here we focus on the inner shifts that create real momentum and open up what's possible next. So there's a conversation that I want to bring forward today. And it's a simple question, but if you really sit with it, it can also feel like a really confronting one. And here's the question. Are you actually willing to have the life you say you want? Not wishing for it, not talking about it, not just imagining it, which is important to do, but I mean willing, because willingness, it does come with a cost. And most people never talk about that part. We love to talk about what we want. We love to talk about what we don't want. We love talking about goals and love talking about the life we'd love to have. But the real question isn't what you want. The real question is, are you willing to live in a way that actually moves you toward it? Because saying yes to the life you want, it also means saying no to a lot of other things. And that's the part that most people quietly avoid. So let's start with something simple. I want you to think about anything you've ever wanted. It could be to get in shape or change your career or grow in your career. It could be to improve your relationship or start a new one. It could be to start something new, like a new business or a new hobby, or to travel, or to build a completely different life. None of those things are outrageous. They're all reasonable requests of things that people want. But wanting something and being willing to live in alignment with it are two very, very different things. Because willingness is not an emotion. So I really want you to get this here. Willingness is behavior. It's what you do on a Tuesday afternoon when you'd rather just sit and doom scroll, but you do it anyway. It's what you do when you're tired. It's what you do when doubt shows up. It's what you do when it would be so much easier to fall back into the familiar. And here is the paradox to all of that. The things people want most in life are usually pretty simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. It's simple to say, I want a better relationship, but are you willing to have uncomfortable conversations? Are you willing to look at your own patterns? Are you willing to stop repeating behaviors that keep the same relationship that you say that you want changed stuck? It's simple to say, I want to be healthier, or I want to get into shape, but are you willing to change your routines, your habits, your environment? Are you willing to prioritize your body and your health even when it's inconvenient? Because, again, simple and easy are not the same thing, and the gap between those two things is willingness. Now, here's the really interesting part. If it were easy, everyone would live the life of their dreams, but they don't. Not because people are lazy, and not because people are incapable, and not because people are not intelligent enough, but because willingness is constantly interrupted by doubt. They doubt that it will ever happen. They doubt that they're the kind of person that those kinds of things happen to. And those doubts quietly will redirect your behavior. They make you hesitate. They make you pull back. They make you ultimately settle. So let me give you an example. I had a client once who desperately wanted a different life. She wanted more freedom. She wanted more financial freedom and more time freedom. She wanted more creativity in her life. She wanted to stop living on autopilot. And she was very clear that she could see that January turned into June, and June turned into November, and another year would go by, and really nothing much changed. And when we talked about it, she was incredibly clear about what she wanted. But when it came time to make these small changes that would move her toward that life, something really interesting happened. She would hesitate. Not because she didn't want it, because she really did want it, but because part of her didn't actually believe that it was possible. So she stayed in the familiar, and the familiar felt safer, even though it was also the thing that was keeping her frustrated and restless and ultimately unhappy and unfulfilled in her life. This is one of the most important things to understand about willingness. Your mind will always try to protect what is familiar, even when familiar is not what you want. Another thing that gets in the way of willingness is the belief that you don't know how. And this one shows up everywhere. And I personally had this happen quite a bit because I really wanted a different life when I was leaving my corporate life, 30 years of a corporate life, but I didn't know how. But what I did know is that someone knew how. Someone had done it. And so I sought out people that had what I wanted, and I worked with them to help get myself straight, my mind straight, the way that I saw myself, the way that I saw what was possible, with working with somebody who had what it was that I wanted. And I hear this often. I don't know how. I don't know how things are going to get better. I don't know how I'm going to get from here to there. But if you really look closely at that statement, it's often just fear wearing a very, very convincing disguise, because most things in life we can figure out. Really think about that. Most things we can figure out. You don't need the entire path before you begin something. You just need the willingness to start moving. Every person who has ever created something meaningful in their life began in the same place. Think about that. They didn't know exactly how, but they were willing to find out. And there's another belief that stops people from staying the course. And it's the belief that it's going to take too long or it's going to be too hard. And this one also shows up a lot. People say it's going to take forever. I'm never going to get there. Or it's going to take too much time. But here's the question I always ask. Time is going to pass anyway. 5 years from now will arrive whether you change anything or not. The only question is, who will you be when you get there? Because willingness is really about something deeper. It's about deciding that the life you want is worth staying the course for. It's deciding that you are worth staying the course for. And this is where something really interesting happens. The people who eventually create the life they want are not necessarily the most talented. They're not always the most confident. And they're not always the most prepared, but they are the most aligned. They stay in motion, they continue adjusting, they continue learning, they keep showing up. And over time, that alignment compounds. There's a teaching that shows up in a lot of personal development traditions. Tony Robbins talks about it, James Clear talks about it in a different way. Neuroscience explains it through the brain's plasticity. Your brain rewires itself through repeated behavior. Every time you follow through on something you say you will do, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with self-trust. And every time you abandon your word to yourself, you reinforce the opposite. And that is why willingness is not just philosophical. It's actually neurological. Your brain is constantly learning from what you do, not what you say, not from what you intend, not from what you hope for, but from what you repeat. Which brings me to something really, really important. Willingness is not about intensity. It's about consistency. It's not about making one big, huge, dramatic decision. It's about hundreds of small decisions that move in the same direction. That's how lives actually change, quietly, gradually, through repetition. So let's talk about the real cost of willingness, because saying yes to what you want also means saying no to a lot of other things. It means saying no to distractions, no to excuses, no to habits that keep you stuck, and sometimes it means saying no to the expectations of other people. And that's where many, many people hesitate, because growth often changes the dynamics in your life. It changes how you spend your time. It changes how you relate to people. It changes how you even see yourself. And not everyone is going to understand that. But here's what I want you to remember. You don't need everyone's permission to change your life. You only need your own willingness. So here's a question for you. What do you say you want, but haven't been willing to fully move toward yet? Not because you're incapable and not because you don't care, but because something in you is still hesitating. Maybe it's fear, and maybe it's doubt, and maybe it's the discomfort of something that's unfamiliar. But if you're honest with yourself, you probably already know the answer. So let me give you a simple rewire tool that you can try this week. It's one question, and it's surprisingly powerful. Whenever you find yourself hesitating, ask yourself this one question. What would willingness look like right now? Not perfection, not the entire solution, just willingness. What would willingness do in this moment? Would it send that email? Would it have that conversation? Would it take that walk? Would it make that phone call? Would you start the thing that you've been putting off? Often the answer is very simple. And when you start acting from that place, something shifts. You begin teaching yourself that you're someone who follows through. You're someone who makes moves. You're someone who stays aligned with what matters. And that's how you grow self-trust, because willingness has momentum. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. And the more natural it becomes, the more your life starts to change. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, because it won't, but because you become someone who stays in motion. In another episode, we're going to talk about alignment, because willingness has two sides. There's the behavioral side, the actions that you take, and there's the internal side, what you're feeding mentally and emotionally while you take those very actions. You can be doing all the right things on the outside, but still quietly aligning with doubt on the inside. And that's where we're going to get into next. So for now, here's what I want you to take with you. The life you want is not created in one dramatic moment. It's created through willingness, through staying the course, through continuing to move in the direction that matters most to you, even when it's inconvenient, even when you're unsure, and even when it would be easier to stay where you are, because over time, willingness compounds, and that's how a changed life begins. So as always, when listening to the podcast, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and keep moving forward, and I will be here when you're ready for the next episode. If something in today's episode resonated with you, you'll find a link in the show notes to book a free consultation call. Or you can visit elisecraft.com to explore my programs and free resources. Nothing changes until you do. And when you do, everything does. This is a changed life. Not all at once, but for good.